There's a pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Hello, BookTube. I'm Sean Breeze Books. Welcome back to my channel, and you are about to watch a fascinating interview that I had with the London-based British writer Orla Owen about her 2024 novel, Christ on a Bike, which I read at the end of last year, spilling over into early January, and interviewed Orla about it, which is what you're about to see. Since our interview in early January, this novel has been nominated for the Dublin Literary Prize, which is just amazing. That's wonderful. And I don't know when the shortlist comes out, but keeping my fingers crossed for Orla. A word about spoilers. I have now rewatched this video now that I've edited it, and I've paid very close attention to what is not discussed on the back. And there's very little discussed on the back. It's the same little synopsis that's on the Goodreads link, and it's very vague. So the cutoff that I have imposed on this chat is the first 83 pages. Anything that's discussed in the first 83 pages, I'm saying is spoiler-free. If I went by this, none of it, almost none of the conversation would be spoiler-free. But anything up to page 83 is fair game, and I'm not marking it as a spoiler. But from chapter 12 on, I am going to put up a mild spoiler wall, and all of the timestamps will be below and also in the show notes. And then I'm going to put another hard spoiler timestamp about 10 minutes later. And then there's lots of non-spoilery stuff in maybe the last 10 minutes of it. And that time will also be timestamped, and you'll be warned, okay? It's a little complicated because I didn't remember how vague this was. So for people that are spoiler-free fundamentalists, you can skip the mild spoilers and the hard spoilers and go directly to the non-spoilery stuff at the end. Yeah, so with that out of the way, please enjoy. Hello, BookTube. I'm Sean Breeze Books. Welcome back to my channel, and this is a very special discussion with the British writer Orla Owen, joining us from South London about her most recent novel, Christ on a Bike, which I recently read, very recently, and so I'm glad that Orla was available to have this chat while the book is still so fresh in my mind, and really enjoyed, and we're here to talk about it. Hello, Orla.
Hello. And one tiny thing, not so tiny, I'm an Irish writer officially. I don't sound it, but born and bred there, lived there, Irish passport, but lived here a long time and did a lot of drama. Yeah.
You corrected me the last time. And
Did I?
You did, and I didn't stick in my head. You just need to write a memoir about all that stuff. You got a Welsh husband, right?
I know, very Celtic. Welsh husband remembered, yeah.
And how long have you lived in London?
A long time, 30 years, 40, no, longer. Going to give my age away. Yeah, long time. About 40 years, yeah.
So maybe that's a good first question. What kind of a novel, in terms of what demonym would you use to describe this novel? Would you describe it as Irish? It's not an Irish novel, I don't think, in any way. It's set in large part in Wales. Would you say it's a British novel? I don't know.
No, do we have to call it that? Do we have to say? Yeah,
Absolutely,
I mean, it's
not.
Yeah, just a novel, I think, because it's mainly set in Wales, West Wales, which is beautiful, and also a bit in Hackney, where I lived for a long time. So, yeah, and actually my two novels preceding it were set nowhere, officially just make-believe, just a town. Yeah, place in my imagination.
In that way, you're very much like Ronan Hession.
Yes.
His novels don't have an identifiable setting. Or give us the opening premise of Christ on a Bike.
Okay, so Christ on the Bike focuses on a character called Keris, who gets an unexpected inheritance. And it seems to solve all her problems, but there are some rules attached, and what seem very simple rules. One is that she has to go and live in a beautiful house in West Wales. The second is that she can't share the money or the wealth that she's given, apart from giving small gifts of £50 and things. And the third thing is, when she dies, the reason she got the inheritance was she said a prayer over a body in a church in Mountain, West Wales. That is a real place, actually, that I love very much. And when she dies, she has to sit in an open coffin, her body, and whoever prays for her will then inherit what she's been given. She is renting in London, is late 40s, and thinking this is a chance for me to be settled and have a really secure future somewhere I love. So she goes for it.
And it has to be the first person to sign the register. And she happened to be the only person that signed the register for this Thomas fellow. And she went into the church just because she loved the church. And your description of that church is really vivid. Tell us a little bit more about that church.
It's a really beautiful place. It's called Mwnt, MWNT, in West Wales. And we used to go there. My husband's Welsh, so we'd go to Wales a lot, especially when our children were younger. And I love that coastline. And it's a really simple, just white church, just a whitewashed building. And when you go in, it's just got the sort of main church bit, and it has this really beautiful slate altar in it. And the setting is just incredible. It's in this field, and there's a sort of gentle cliff and hill behind it. And then to the left of it, you can just walk down to the beach. I think it's National Trust Beach or Welsh Trust. And there's this beautiful cove, which is great for bodyboarding. And when we used to go there, it was never very busy either. So it just felt idyllic. And I find churches really powerful. It's a really calm, quiet place with sort of it's behind a small stone wall with some graves. I've always wanted to put it in a novel because I just love it. And the idea for this came up, so it was perfect.
Now, I don't want to get too sidetracked, but I do have to ask you at this juncture, have you read A Month in the Country by J.L. Carr?
I haven't, no, but I need to.
For that reason only, you must. Editing Sean here. This next moment of dialogue got all garbled, but I was simply telling Orla that A Month in the Country was set in an ancient British church.
Ah, is it? Ah, yes. My husband was
interesting. Key part of the setting in the village, yeah.
We went for a walk in Wales in the summer. We were going to Bookish in Crickhowell, a really great bookshop. And Emma there said, oh, go and do this other walk. It's all really busy in Pen y Fan and stuff. There's a really old church on it. So we went on this walk and came across this church that she told us about, I think from the 1600s, which had this figure on it, which was originally like a sort of full-size figure. Originally, it was in blood, apparently, on the wall. So really pagan, but amazing old graveyards as well, and all the gravestones inside the church. And my husband was like, gosh, you love graveyards and death and everything. And I was like, actually, it's the life I'm interested in. Whenever I see them, I'm thinking, what did they look like? How did they die? What happened? Were they happy? Were they in pain? What was their life? So I find them fascinating places, yeah.
Without being too heavy-handed in my prediction, I think you're going to really love A Month in the Country. Your protagonist is Karis, and the irony of this is that she has no personal connection to the dead man whose inheritance she inherits, but the novel opens with a funeral. So tell us a little bit about that part of the open.
Yeah, the first chapter is her at her sister's mother-in-law's funeral, who she really loved. And her sister is called Seren, and they lost their parents when they were young. Their parents died when they were younger, so they're both orphans in the world. And it's her sister's mother-in-law, and she really loved her. And this woman called Gwen took Karis under her wing, and they just had a really great friendship. Now, the complication in the story is that when Gwen's will is read, because she used this equity release scheme, there's very little to give her children. And although they hadn't ever wanted money, they'd subconsciously thought something will come when she dies because she has a house in Wales. Now, Seren, this sort of upsets her because she's stressed and she's working full time and she's got 2 children and she's got a big mortgage. So it creates this added complication because then Karis inherits from someone with no emotional attachment. So there's no sadness to it. There's no emotional complication, except Seren then becomes obsessed about why did she get it? How come she hasn't worked as hard as me and hasn't got all these expenses? And now she goes swanning off and gets to live this luxurious lifestyle.
And I would say that the verb obsessed would be the most understated verb possible. Obsessed is a very strong verb, but it's not strong enough for Seren's reaction. And what intrigues me about that is you're setting up grieving, which is a profound theme of the novel, but you're not doing it in a straightforward way. You're doing it. So there is Seren, but especially Karis grieving for this mother figure, Gwen. And then that's not where the inheritance comes from. But in showing Karis and her feelings, I just was immediately attached to her. She's just a lovely, emotionally appealing character.
Oh, good. One of them had to be.
Yes, and I really loved Karis, and I think that you set the tone with how much she cared about somebody who she had no biological connection to, but she had this kind of in-law connection to her sister, but that she and Gwen had a very special relationship. And so I thought, knowing the premise a bit, we chatted a few months ago. You were my mystery guest. I'll put a link to that in the show notes, although I think we're going to be covering pretty much everything that was there here. I thought, oh, somehow, especially when Gwen's will was read and there was nothing really for anybody, I thought, oh, Gwen has secretly hidden all her money and she's secretly going to give it to Karis. That's what it is. But no, that is not what it was.
No.
So very interesting. Tell us about the people that are administering, is that the right word? This inheritance.
Yeah, so it becomes clear quite early on that people are going to make sure Keris sticks to the rules. And you don't know if that is in an ominous way or just a kind way or just what they've got to do as their jobs. But it is quite clear that this encompasses a few of the villagers and that it's not just one person or two people. And Keris starts to become a bit paranoid. She gets a bit lonely living there. And there's a figure that sort of in a red top and a bicycle that she keeps seeing, hence the cover as well. Yeah, which I love. And she starts to question, am I being paranoid? Is that person real? Is it someone following me or not? And yeah, you find out at the end more about that.
All right, as I promised, this is where I say the mild spoiler section is about to begin. And I'm not going to put the timestamp for the hard spoiler section, because if you're not going to watch the mild spoilers, you're probably not going to watch the hard spoilers. So if you want to skip over all spoilers, be they mild or hard, here's the marker for where the spoiler-free section at the end begins.
To the villagers, she goes around their shop. She spends a lot of her money. She's very excited. She's got this income. But they do, if she ever steps out of line with the rules, they do seem to know about it and put her into check.
And so the way the story is structured, we know fairly early on that there's some kind of a organization, or that this is not the first time this happened. This is not the first time these people in the village, there's a lawyer and he has some staff, but they've been through this before. But we don't know at the beginning any more than that, but we know that fairly early on. So as a reader, are these people malevolent? Are they benevolent? What is all this ultimately going to be about? But then we see Harris very confused about all that and really enjoying and drinking lots of expensive coffee and truffles and going out to cafes, and fairly soon coming up against this wall where she really wants to share this with her friends, but the whole thing is premised on the fact that she can't. And is Stephen the lawyer's name, right?
Yes. Yep.
How does Stephen explain the rationale behind that?
And he says their rationale is that because Keris did such a kind thing, saying a prayer for someone she didn't know, that she didn't have to do that. Their rationale is that Thomas, the person who was dead, who left it to her, wants her to have it for herself because she's probably someone who's always done kind things for others in her life. So now let's make this all about you and you enjoy this. But obviously, I think when you think of winning the lottery, or me anyway, all those things, you always think, oh, wow, I could do this for that person and that for that and help this person. And that's part of the fun and joy of having wealth, I imagine. So if an unexpected wealth with no complications. So the fact that she can't starts to create she finds that very difficult.
And that opens up a kind of a thematic space for you to really probe all of those issues. Not so much grief. You do explore grief a lot, but this part of the story allows you to explore kind of capitalism and wealth and selfishness and selflessness and sharing and all those things. I was just thinking about all those things as I was reading it, and that was just a fascinating way to approach exploring some of those big issues. And meanwhile, she's got this, can I say, very selfish sister, Saren, who is very resentful. And she does invite them to come, and there's that 3-day limit. How does that visit go?
Oh, yeah. I don't know if I said that earlier. Yeah. So if she has someone to stay, they can only stay 3 nights a week as well. So thanks for saying that. So she can't have a friend to live with her because they've got nowhere to live, that sort of thing. So the visit does not go well, Sean. Oh my. Yeah. So,
Understatement.
yeah. So Seren I have love for Seren in writing her as well. So she's just someone on the brink. She's exhausted and she's done everything right in the way that you're meant to in order to create this world for her family. And she's just really tired. It tips her over when Keris seems to just get this thing. Having Keris never planned ahead, she still rented, she hadn't bought. She wasn't sure how she'd have a pension. She didn't do the things that Seren has done that you're meant to do. So when she stays for 3 days, 3 nights, rather than just enjoying it and feeling happy for her, the resentment just builds and she just wants to leave and she becomes furious with her husband too. And she just doesn't understand why Keris can't break the rules and help them a bit. It makes no sense to her. And she starts to wish she had the inheritance.
And the way you set up that opening that we were talking about a minute ago, it makes more sense that there was a wound opened up, that her mother-in-law didn't leave the family really very much of anything. And then this happened just too later with their sister. So then, probably because of all that pressure from her sister, Keris does decide to break the rules. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so she goes down to Cardiff for the day. And when she's there, she's enjoying spending the money. She buys her sister and herself, and she decides to treat herself because she thinks no one can see me here. No one will know I've done this. She's got so much money she can hardly spend it. So she buys a mulberry bag, which is an expensive brand of bag, and a matching purse. And she gets it sent directly from the shop to her sister. And her sister is overjoyed. She gets it next day delivery. She's so happy. She's never had anything like that before and she'd never be able to afford it. But then when Keris is then called into the accountant's office and asked, she has to give receipts every month just to show what she's spent. And she's asked, is there anything more that you need to tell us? No, everything's fine. That's it. So then she's asked to take an envelope to Stephen's office and just drop that off, would you, when you go and say hi to him? And it's the receipt, the copy of the receipt for the mulberry bag. And they know that she's done that. So they're not awful about it. They just give her a telling off and say, you need to promise not to do this again.
And happening alongside all of this is people are coming to her door, or she is seeing people that she thinks are the same person that look like a bearded Jesus type figure.
Yeah.
So this reader was confused, or no, not confused, was wondering through the whole novel, is she paranoid? Is this, what's going on? I think the first thing was one of those guys, or that guy, came to her door. What happened then?
Oh, at the very beginning for Thomas. Yeah, he actually, for me, wasn't one of the guys on the bicycles. He was just someone. Yeah, so he was just someone who knew Thomas and is very periphery, just starting to create a little question in her mind of why was someone coming here. So he just disappears because the book is bigger than it's her story. Do you know, their world is bigger than her story. It's happened before. There's a history to it. I know where that's come from. It's an ancient trust. So in my head, I know how it got to this point, as it were. And then the boys and bicycles, yeah, as her paranoia grows, the boy on the bicycle, this is where the title comes from, Christ on the bike. So that's just saying in Wales and Ireland of, oh, for God's sake, for goodness sake. Someone says that in a shop and she hears it just as she sees a boy in a red top and a bicycle, and it starts to stick in her head as she's getting paranoid. Is this Christ on a bike that I'm seeing? Am I being judged for having this wealth, for taking this? Am I being judged by a bigger power for not sharing it? Because there's one scene in her head where she's thinking, maybe God's testing me. And if I was a good person, I'd break the rules and share it with people who need it more than me. And then God will be happy with me. And if I die, I'll go to heaven, not hell. And so she just starts, because she's lonely as well and not talking to enough people. She has this inner dialogue going on in her head where she's just trying to work everything out. And then she seems to see the figures on the bike more and more.
And so again, you've introduced an unusual part of the story, and that allows you to bring in all the religious stuff in a really interesting way. And then we get to the end of the novel, which we'll maybe talk about in a bit, where I was left, delightfully confused by all of that stuff. There's something else that I have to ask you about. It's probably a small thing, but I kept noticing it. As much as I noticed the Christ on a bike people all over town, we get very detailed, almost emotion-laden descriptions of her watching the vehicles of the various people. It's usually Stephen or somebody, but occasionally it's like her sister or whatever, as they're driving off from her house in Wales. Was it a curved driveway? And those descriptions are really elaborate. And what was that about, or did you even notice that you were doing that?
Do you know, I don't think I did. That's interesting. No, I don't think I did. Yeah.
I couldn't figure it out. It wasn't something that I necessarily wanted to figure out, but I really noticed it. And I thought there's something about being inside and outside. And so those people that are crossing over and going back out into the world, there's something about that. It's not something that I need an answer to, but I really did notice it. I was fascinated by it.
Yeah, that's why I did it. Yeah, that's why I answered that she was. Yeah, I'm glad you spotted that, Sean. In my head, as a visual, it's very much. She's usually on the upper landing, looking out. So it was like she's slightly imprisoned, without a doubt. And
Absolutely.
the types of cars were more when she starts thinking she's being followed, because her car's bright orange. That was intentional, so it's easy to follow it on a sort of dark day in Wales. Yeah.
And this beautiful house is on the beach, and she's got really big windows, and she feels a bit exposed because there's no blinds or curtains or anything. And what happens when she asks them to put in blinds or curtains?
Yeah, they say no. So they say you're not allowed to make any changes that are building, as it were, to the house. And that includes drilling into the walls. She even calls, when she has a friend who comes to stay called Sam, who boosts, because she's thinking of leaving. And Sam's, what? Oh my God, give it time. We're going to have a ball. And they have a great weekend. And she feels much happier after that. And Sam's, who are they to say you can't put curtains up? Come on, we're going to call the guy. And she does try and arrange for someone to come, but he doesn't turn up. And she's told, no, we did say you're not allowed to make any changes. So she is very exposed there. Floor to ceiling, sort of huge windows or the bifold doors. And so people can see in, but she can't see out.
That just goes back to this feeling that she has. And she's, am I paranoid? But once that happens, I think she realizes it's not just all in her head if they're not allowing that.
Yeah.
And also going back to conversation that we are given access to early in the book, where after she walks away, having signed all the paperwork, after Karis leaves the office and goes to check her bank balance, she signed all the paperwork. We see them alone without her, and they say, well, I hope this one works out. And somebody said, oh, it'll probably not work out. And they say, oh, come on, let's be optimistic. So we know that this has not worked out. For whatever reason, this project is being is happening, that it hasn't worked out in the past. And so we're thinking about, as she starts to think about leaving, I'm reflecting on that earlier conversation.
And here I am again, just to say this is the hard spoiler section, so if you were okay with the soft or mild spoilers, but don't want to hear the hard spoilers, skip ahead to the timestamp below. Also in the show notes to the spoiler-free ending of this conversation.
They want it to work for her. I call them a trust. They're not malicious. They would never hurt her. They want it to work, but people are given this gift and then it's up to them. So it will affect different people differently according to their life, according to who they are, according to their upbringing. People being given something like this, they will all deal with it differently. So that was the point of it as well. So hence, I've been working on a sequel so that it goes, other people can inherit.
And I think we've already said it, but to reiterate that in designing this inheritance process the way they do, they are hoping to attract good-hearted people that would sign the guest book at a funeral of a dead person they don't know. And that would get the right kind of person, somebody like Karis. And in fact, her sister Saren is in the church, comes into the church, and she doesn't sign the book, and to her permanent regret. To what degree is this novel about class?
Oh, that's interesting. Huh.
inherited wealth. They're not used to having money. As Karis is not
No.
used to having money. There's
Yeah.
just, and family just scraping by. It's just a windfall, and it's,
I'll tell you what, that's such a good question because class is at the crux of how it all began. So basically, I think I can say this. One of the things that started me thinking about this book as well, stuff in England, I think it's Sussex, West Sussex, there's a big sort of huge, very ancient inherited wealth that keeps being inherited where they don't pay inheritance tax and all this stuff. And the first time I knew about it was driving through an area and you went, oh, this is really pretty. All these houses have got yellow window frames. We were driving to see a friend who was renting a little house down there. And that's important because when I got to her house, they said, oh my God, yours has got the yellow window. This is so pretty. Wow, isn't that sweet? And she said, no, that's just mark of ownership. So it's that a big sort of manor house, bigger Downton Abbey type place, owns all these places and have done for hundreds of years. And everyone rents off them. And so hugely sort of high upper class. I don't know these people, but I don't think they've ever had to work because there's inherited wealth. I think there's all that sort of thing going on. And I thought, God, that's not fair, is it? That Joe Bloggs, ordinary people, do have to pay inheritance tax and do this, which is fine. It's right. But that these guys have all these trusts and everything set up so they don't have to. So I thought, what would happen, giving away a prequel almost, but if you had siblings, they inherited all this stuff. So one in Wales, one down there, say, all completely made up. And one decided, I'm going to do this and it's mine, it's my land, this belongs to me, it's my right, just through birth. And the other went, do you know what? I want to try and do something different with this. I want to help my community. We're going to have this as a village. We're going to share it and we're going to create good. And all of you are going to have a good life through this. And that was my sort of thoughts on how it all started. So was class initially in the village that doesn't exist in the sense of they're not upper class or anything. They're all just leading ordinary lives, but they've got enough and they've got security and they've got happiness. And so, yeah, it does touch on it hundreds of years ago.
sure. And I guess maybe part of what I was thinking was that being, what would you say, lower middle class, Karis and Saren? Or
Oh,
just
no,
middle
I
class?
think they're middle class. Yeah,
Middle
no,
class?
I don't think lower at all. To live in Hackney and be paying rent, you need a good wage. So she's,
Okay.
yeah.
But being middle class and not having a lot of money, she experiences the money differently than if it had come from her rich father,
Yes, definitely.
right? So
Definitely.
was that aspect of it that I was
Yeah.
really fascinated by.
Yeah.
And Saren's, maybe the envy would have been the same. She was, if this father had left it to one daughter, not the other, it would have been very similar envy.
Yeah.
But
I think middle class perhaps used to be much more comfortable than it is now. And I've got a thing like I'm middle class. Everyone I know is working harder and going, I'll have to work till 67 because I can't afford to retire and this, that, and the other. Whereas it felt like it used to be a bit different in our parents' days, if that they maybe could retire earlier and stuff. So that's why Saren and Keris, even though they're middle class, they're struggling. They're by no means wealthy or anything. And yeah, their relationship, the point of it was that they're not that close and they got on fine, but they just weren't the sort of sisters who went for coffee each week or met up once a month for a massive catch up and dinner. But they didn't dislike each other. They were just, I think this line, they just weren't that similar. And they had different lives going on. They'd help each other if push came to shove and they'd see each other occasionally for a big lunch. But they weren't like really close best mates type thing.
And I think Saren was always pretty judgmental in her opinion of her sister and what life choices Karis was making before this happened. Yeah, absolutely. I would like to talk about the blurb on the back. Nina Patel from Prima magazine, her blurb is about your novel is Black Mirror meets Tales of the Unexpected with shades of Shirley Jackson. All of that rings very true to me. But the other one that I wanted to bounce off you, and maybe you saw it on one of my videos where I talked about reading this book, I got a whiff of Muriel spark.
Oh, okay. Wow, that's amazing.
And I guess it would be what was her novel where people were hearing voices and there was automatic typing? Was that The Comforters? But there was just some weird things happening that when the weird stuff with the different men on bikes and all that, I think This is giving me a Muriel Spark vibe. So take that, put that in your
Ah,
pipe and smoke.
I'm blooming well, Sean. That's wonderful. I loved the trees when I read that a couple of years ago, Percival Everett, where it turns into sort of horror, ghost sort of things. You can suspend your disbelief. And as a writer, sometimes it's really nice to remind yourself, I can do whatever I want with this. It's all made up. It doesn't have to be real. Obviously, you want to keep the reader, but yeah, you can make it a bit folk horror, a bit different, and have fun with it like that. But to you, writing it, it's real, obviously. That's definitely, I feel if I go up to West Wales, I'll meet these people.
Yes,
Yeah.
it is the Comforters. And it was just the vibe, not specific plot points, but there was a kind of mysterious eeriness to some of the things that didn't make sense, but they didn't need to make sense, but they were eerie. That reminded me of Muriel Spark. And so, do these other references in this blurb resonate with you? Black Mirror, Tales of the Unexpected, Shirley Jackson?
Yeah, I was thrilled with that because I was hoping it would be a bit sort of Tales of the Unexpected. I wanted it to be a little bit different. Have you watched the films like Midsummer and Hereditary at all? So they're
No.
quite sort of. I don't like scary movies usually, but those two, because I get too scared, not because I think they're not good, but those two I thought, yeah, was brilliant. They go into that almost Wicker Man type territory. And yeah, I love those references. I was
So-
thrilled. But
Yeah.
it does veer from, you could go, that wouldn't exactly happen if you were there. But I do hope the reader, I've worked quite carefully to make sure it did work if you were there. And also suspend your disbelief of, but life is like this. Not in that village, it's not. You know what I mean?
I'd love to segue from there to, did you imagine a certain kind of reader you were writing it for, or now? What do you think? What kind of a reader? Readers who like these books, look like these writers would like yours?
Oh, gosh. I always just hope anyone will read it because my books never fit neatly into a genre. So they're not thriller, they're not horror, they're not this. It's just fiction. I think lots of book clubs have picked it up. And I've done lots of events that have been brilliant with book clubs, and also at shops, the book clubs have come. And yeah, like one said, oh, we usually get really drunk at our book club, but we were talking so much about your book, we forgot to drink the wine because we were just going
I-
off. I was like, what a compliment. Yeah, exactly. And also almost rowing about it, going, no, this or no, that. And one
Well,
thing
that's-
that was clear was it affects people, especially the inheritance and the grief part, differently according to what they've experienced. So some people were like, oh my God, that rings so true. Others, one man was like, oh gosh, it made me really worry because I'm renting at the moment and I'm this age and that, and what will happen in my life. And it's been a worry. And then I read it in your book. And so it was interesting what it sparked in different readers.
Absolutely. And I really want to underscore that in terms of my reaction to the book, that you delved so deep into those big themes that just kept me going from start to finish. And your writing is lovely.
Oh, thank you. That's
Yeah,
really kind.
and the characters were well drawn. I really had a soft spot for Karis, and maybe the less said about how I felt about Sarah and the better.
You're allowed to not like her. She was obviously not written to be particularly loved, but I have a soft spot for her just because you can understand where her pain's coming from, and she had a messed up childhood and things.
Absolutely, and you show that very well through a really intriguing anecdote that we maybe don't need to talk about in detail, about her reaction to, what was she, a hypochondriac
Yeah.
mother?
Yeah.
And in that chapter, I said, oh, yeah, she's not that bad, Sean.
Yeah.
I
She's just
never
messed
liked-
up.
Yes. There's other people more messed up than her, and that she can see that. So you're working on a sequel. What can you tell us about that, Orla?
Okay, so it's a cyclical thing, as we talked at the beginning. And the sequel, it obviously couldn't be the same book again. It was always planned. It delves more into the lives of the villagers and the trust, and you learn more about them, while also some outsiders come in. And it does end up being much more the villagers against the outsiders. So what happens with that? And then perhaps they do have a bit of darkness in them when it comes to protecting their world.
That
What do
sounds
you
fascinating.
reckon?
That sounds fascinating. Now, there was one Reese, I think. Reese, I had a bit of a crush on Reese. He seemed sexy and quite sweet.
Oh, yeah. A little Bob Dylan-y.
Little ability. There you go. That's what
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And when will you have this for us, Orla?
I've just sent a draft to Blue Moose to see if they like it, but you never know. In the hands of the Blue Moose gods, it might need some work. And the beginning bit, I'm just waiting to see what they think, really. And I'm working on another novel too that's completely different, which is a tale of revenge, actually. Yeah, sweetness and light from me, basically.
It's like Orla Owen. Nothing less. And you don't have to tell us, but I'm going to ask anyway. Do you have a working title for the sequel?
I do. Do you want a world exclusive? It's called A Circle of Strangers.
A Circle of Strangers. Oh, that's great. Well, before I let you go, tell us what you've been reading recently that you'd like to recommend.
Okay, so there's two. I've just finished this, The Bee Sting by Paul Murray. Have you read it? It's a long novel.
No, it's the Paul Butler book that didn't win. Made it all the way to the short.
Yes, and I thought it was fantastic. And it was nice. I had time. I'm a very slow reader, and this is a big book, but I had some days off work over Christmas, and I was also sleeping really badly. So I actually read it all really quickly for me, and I thought it was fantastic. Really loved it. Would recommend. Beautiful storytelling about a family. And just set in Ireland. And then I just got introduced as well. I've got a book on my Kindle I read as well at night when I'm not sleeping. And I just read Elizabeth Strout for the first, the Kitteridge, Olive. Yes.
Kitteridge, yeah.
Yes. And I've just started reading the second one. So Olive, again. And I'm so glad I found her. She was recommended. My Name is Lucy Barton was recommended by Bookish in Halifax when I went to the Book Corner Halifax when I went to do an event there. And they gave me a book as a present for doing it, which was really lovely. So it was My Name is Lucy Barton. So I'm now on my third Elizabeth Strout going, lucky me that she's written these amazing books and I've got lots of them to read. So it's joyous. She's fantastic.
That's wonderful. I have not read her. They made the Olive Kitteridge novel into a miniseries of 4 episodes with one of my favorite actors, Frances McDormand.
No.
Amazing as Olive Kitteridge. So I feel like I've read it, but I haven't read it. So you must.
Oh my God, I have to watch that because A, I love her. Anything she's in is just brilliant, isn't it? And B, I love TV and films. Great.
No, so I feel like I've read it, haven't. And another of my mystery guests recently, it was the Scottish novelist, Alan Radcliffe. And one of the books he recommended was, one of the authors he recommended was Elizabeth Strout. And that conversation went long, so I didn't have space to put up his Strout talk. And I put it up later as a separate video. And I'll link that in the show notes. And then I made my mom watch the video. And I said, does this sound like an interesting writer for you? And she said, yeah. So I gave her My Name is Lucy Barton for Christmas, and she really enjoyed it.
Yeah, brilliant.
So,
yeah.
Elizabeth Strout is in the atmosphere. This was a lovely conversation about a really interesting, absolutely fascinating novel, Christ on a Bike, Orla. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's just so lovely to see you and a real treat to be asked to come on. So thank you. I really appreciate it.
Look forward to you coming back.
Yes, me too. Can't wait.